Social media is ruining relationships. I think I see a version of that statement probably every few months or so. And I saw one today, and it said, a lot of people cannot find peace in their relationship because they allow social media to decide what their relationship should be like or what their man or woman should be doing. Everybody's love language isn't the same, but you can compromise with each other and work on what the other needs. Y'all keep letting these influencers put unrealistic nonsense in your head. Now, there were a lot of things that were said in that post, and I agree that there is nonsense on social media. I also agree that some people are easily influenceable, and social media can take advantage of that. But there's also a vested interest in patriarchy to keep women settling for the bare minimum. Now, there's a lot of posts about monetary things that may be unrealistic, but in terms of pointing out ways that society has normalized maltreatment, social media is often quite on point because a lot of us grew up seeing things in relationships that we thought were, quote, normal. And as we grow and read and go to therapy, and we realize not just in romantic relationships, in family relationships, in business relationships, in friendships, there's a whole lot of toxic patterns that were normalized in the 70s and 80s and 90s and 2000s. And now, not only social media, but books, articles, videos, even news stories and research are showing not only those toxic patterns, but the impact of those toxic patterns on our society, on our nervous system, on our health, even on our children as they grow up. We know now a lot more than we did then. And kind of pointing social media out as an evil is, to me, not a founded accusation. Social media is a tool. It can do good and it can do evil and it can do nothing at all to some people. So I wanted to continue with this idea because another thing that was mentioned in the post was compromise. People need to compromise. And one of my favorite quotes from Eartha Kitt is compromise. Why would I do that? Now I do believe in compromise, but I also believe, like Eartha Kitt said, sometimes you need to say, why would I do that? Why am I compromising? What am I compromising for? And what am I compromising about? And is compromise actually the solution to the issue? Because a lot of women have been compromising for generations, and that has led them to do a lot more than their share in domestic labor, in maintaining the emotional stability of the relationship. There was an article that came out recently in the New York Times, and it was talking about how a lot of women are not wanting a relationship because of the toll of man keeping. And man keeping was a term that they created to explain or to lump in all of the things that women do, from setting appointments, to cleaning up after a guy, to cooking for him, to being his therapist, to making sure his hygiene is on point, to actually, in a sense, mothering him in a lot of ways, being his cheerleader, being his coach, filling out his job appointments and his paperwork for different assignments. And even if the guy's in college, doing some of his work for him. Now, of course, this doesn't fit every relationship, but when they were beginning to list all of the things that women were doing to keep relationships, Princella Clark has a video where she says, a lot of women in relationships are literally almost paying the man to be with them, because not only are they doing 50-50 financially, they're doing 100% of a lot of other things like the childcare and the cooking and the taking care of the emotional status of the relationship. They're the ones setting up the dates often. They're the ones buying his mom, his sister, his friends, his business partners gifts. They're doing all of this stuff. So literally it's like they are paying him to be with them, because he's getting so many benefits that it is really to his detriment to leave. So when we're talking about compromise, what more do you want women to do? A lot of women are already putting their careers on the back burner, putting their education on the back burner, putting their bodies on the line in terms of taking on the brunt of a lot of, like I said, the domestic labor, the childcare, or even pregnancy. And we have normalized this ride or die mentality, this idea of loyalty, this idea of putting all the responsibility for keeping the family together on the woman. When I was growing up, a lot of times people would say, man, she can't keep a man. She can't keep a man? What is he? I mean, it was almost like he had no say in it if she was doing all the things that she needed to do, if she was jumping through the hoops, if she was dotting all her I's and crossing all her T's, she would be keeping him. But if she didn't do that, it was her fault that he left or he strayed or, he wasn't involved in the relationship. So all of the responsibility for keeping him, man keeping, as I already mentioned, was put on her. And this has massive repercussions. Married and partnered women generally have more health issues. They have more anxiety. They have less career growth. And they die up to 8 years sooner than single women. And this is the case even if they are the breadwinner. They still tend to take on the brunt of the domestic labor and all these other man-keeping tasks, even when they're the breadwinner. And so women are doing this compromising. Women are doing this investing. It's often the women reading the books about love languages and relationships and suggesting therapy or quality time or more communication, while the men often resist or question, why do I have to do that? Everything's just fine. You're the one making a big deal about, our relationship issues. And social media often just spotlights these trends. So women see patterns and they see that they're not alone. And it also publicizes names for things that a lot of us knew were happening, but we didn't know what to call it. When some guy was kind of making jokes that were very derogatory, we didn't know that that was called negging. And it was a way of trying to humiliate us on purpose. We didn't know about how when a guy seemed to consistently draw us close and be nice and sweet and love bomb us, another term, and then pull away and seem to be mean and distant, that literally could be him trying to create a trauma bond, because when you're pulled close, you get all those positive feelings of dopamine and oxytocin, that euphoria, those brain chemicals that get released, those hormones that get released. And then when you are put into a stressful situation because of his behavior, you get adrenaline, you get cortisol, and that hormonal, that biochemical back and forth, up and down, it can literally cause addiction. A trauma bond is actually a chemical addiction to a person that's created by intermittent reinforcement. I'm going to be really sweet to you and over the top and make you feel amazing. And then I'm going to be really mean to you and pull away and make you feel horrible. And by this brain chemistry, you're going to crave those good times and try to jump through hoops to get them because I can do it. You've seen me do it. You've experienced what it feels like to be on the good side of my personality. And then that also reinforces this idea of, see, if you didn't do X, Y, and Z, then I wouldn't have to treat you like this because you know how nice and wonderful I am. So that kind of brings in the Darvo, the deny, accuse, and reverse victim and offender. So these are all terms that might have been in some book somewhere, that might have been in some article somewhere, but when it's put on social media, it's made available to the masses, and now women have access to, these explanations that let them know that they're not crazy, they're not confused. No, this is happening. And this is what it's called, and this is why it's done. And yes, it can be very deliberate. You're not imagining that this seems to be deliberate. This seems to be a pattern, because it can definitely be that. And so social media helped to publicize things that might have been known about for 15, 20, 30 years, or maybe something that we just named recently. So that is the power of social media. It's kind of like D.L. Hughley said. People complain about constantly seeing these videos of police brutality, but this was always going on. You're just seeing it more. It's just publicized more. It's just more visible. But it's not creating it. It's just filming it. And social media is not creating problems in relationship. It's just showing them. There have always been greedy people. There have always been materialistic people. There have always been selfish people. There have always been people who take more than they give and people who give more than they take. This is not new. But social media is now showing us these patterns. And so I think that that's really amazing. And that's really what we should say about what social media does. May you walk in Zenergy. Social media